creation, responsibility, and I'm excited to have Hannah Schultz here with us this morning. Last week we talked about two things. We talked about creation as a site of divine encounter. We talked about it as also a site of grace and responsibility. And Hannah's gonna flush that out a little bit for us more this morning. Hannah, like I said in the announcement, joins us from Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, where she is the program director there. And Hannah and I have the great privilege to work together on lots of initiatives around the city and have done just a lot of organizing work, especially in the last year together. Gitful is helping us plan the river cleanup, which is coming up again on the 25th. So spread the word on that. And then also the October 16th event, keynote speaker and panel discussion that will be from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Science Gallery in Atlanta. That discussion, the keynote address will be given by the Reverend Dr. Durley, who I hope you say just a little bit more about at some point in your presentation for us this morning, so you can continue learning about him. But Hannah is a graduate of Emory University, has an MDiv from there, has worked for the university on various kinds of sustainability initiatives, and then has been working for Gitful for about just 2 years. Yeah, great. So welcome, Hannah. Join me in welcoming Thanks, guys. A little bit of instruction today. We're going to fix the owl on Hannah in this view so that the learners people who are joining us online can see that. And people who view the recording can see that presentation the whole time. So if you have a question, I'm going to be passing around this mic. And I just ask that you go ahead and say your name before you speak so that people who are viewing the recording later know who's talking. So the owl, especially in a configuration like this, and we're set up this way because the funeral won't have to spin its head confusingly around. Okay? Does that make sense? Great. I'll remind you to get it. All right, Hannah, take it.
Hey, everyone. Okay, great. Well, it is so good to be with you this morning. I'm Hannah, I'm the program coordinator at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm excited to be here to continue this conversation about how we as people of faith are called to be good stewards of God's creation, and some of the practical ways that we can do this. And then next week, one of my colleagues, Gayla Tillman, will be here to continue that conversation, focusing specifically on environmental justice, particularly related to issues in and around Atlanta and ways that you all can engage politically. So today I'm going to be focused more on like the practical climate solutions. What can we do as a faith community and as individuals? And then next week, you'll get some of the what does action look like through a policy and advocacy lens. So first, I just want to introduce Gitful. So we are a faith-based nonprofit. We were founded in 2003. We are part of the National Interfaith Power and Light movement. Really excited that Carol is here today as one of the founders of Gitful. So it's so great to meet you and to see you in person. And I just want to name that and give her the recognition that she deserves. And yeah. I'm helping to found Gitful, and I'm just so honored to be able to continue this work that was started then. Our mission is to equip faith communities to care for creation through worship, education, and stewardship. And since 2003, we have partnered with over 500 congregations, and we have almost 100 green teams across the state. And I will talk later in the presentation about what a green team is and what they do. We are part of a national interfaith power and light movement. And I say that because I think it's really important and powerful to think about the fact that it's not just us doing this faith-based environmental organizing here in Georgia, but that there are state affiliates in almost 40 states across the country. So organizations like ours who are working with faith communities in those states to implement practical climate solutions and those congregations and to engage them in local and national advocacy. So we're really excited to be part of this national movement. So today, I know last week you talked a little bit about how our faith inspires us to care for God's creation, but I want to touch on that again today because that's really, the root of what we do is we are kind of unique in the fact that we organize through faith communities because we believe that almost every major faith tradition calls us to care for the natural world around us. So I'm going to just take a minute before we dive into that, how we do this, to frame it as why do we do this as people of faith. In 1967, a historian named Lynn White wrote a condemning article called "The Historical Roots of Our Ecological Crisis," where he blamed the environmental crisis on the anthropocentric worldview of Judeo-Christianity. He argued that the biblical creation account creates an idea that humans are exceptional and sit at the top of the created order. He argues that this worldview has been used to justify our environmental degradation as we use and abuse the world's resources for our own gain. And I name this because I think that that is one way that historically folks have used that creation account and have thought about what our faith tells us about caring for God's creation. We're told that we're given dominion over the rest of the created order. And sometimes that has been used to help justify the ways that we abuse the world's resources. But I think an alternative interpretation of this account encourages us to think about what it means to be made in the image and likeness of God. Genesis 1:26 says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." And so I think as we think about what does it mean to be made in the image and likeness of God, we need to think about the fact that thinking about how God relates to the earth. We know that God loves creation. God made the heavens and the earth, the light and the dark, the plants and the animals, and God called it good. So we need to think about creation as something that is good, something that is worthy of God's love, that's worthy of our love, and to see ourselves as sharing in God's responsibility to care for the creation that God made from God's own hands. In the second creation account, we hear that we are actually given this responsibility, made from the dust and dirt of the earth itself, filled with God's breath of life. We are placed in the Garden of Eden and told to take care of it. Caring for God's creation was our first and only calling. It was our first responsibility. I put this particular translation of this passage on the slide because the word that's used here is farm, and the Hebrew word for farm is used elsewhere in the Old Testament to refer to service. And so I think we can actually think about caring for God's creation as an act of service. And I really love thinking about it in that way, serving the earth. And we see later in the Old Testament how social and ecological justice are intertwined. We see this again and again, but I think one of the best examples of it comes from the Sabbath passages. We're told in the Old Testament that we're supposed to let the land rest for a year. So that's not only to let the land restore its nutrients, to replenish the soil, but Sabbath is also a time for social relationships to be restored. It's a time when farmers are not to glean from the fields, they're to leave their produce for the children, orphans, widows, and other vulnerable people in the population, in the community, to come and pick the produce from the fields. And so I think in this way, we see how social and ecological justice are really deeply intertwined. And I bring that up because justice is such a big part of our calling to care for God's creation. In the New Testament, God tells us that, or Jesus tells us that we are to love God and love neighbor. We know not love our neighbors if we allow the climate crisis to continue to harm our communities. Justice, as you will hear from Gayla Moore next week, really underlies a lot of the work that we're doing at GIPL right now. Is we're thinking about how do we better protect the communities that are affected by what's happening to the environment, how do we love one another better, and how do we fight for just policies at the local, state, and federal level. But we have these 4 faith principles at GIPL that stretch across every major faith tradition, and I think help to guide us in this work. So the first is stewardship, thinking about the responsible use of God's creation, thinking about how are we using our resources wisely? How are we making sure that we have these resources available for generations to come? Justice, which I just mentioned, working to ensure the fair usage and distribution of the Earth's resources. Community of life, understanding our role in the interdependent ecosystem. Again, not seeing ourselves as sitting at the top of the created order, but seeing ourselves as part of an interdependent ecosystem where there's mutual dependence on the earth and the earth's resources. And then this last one is my favorite faith principle. It's awe, recognizing the fingerprints of the divine in created works. I think that we have lost in many ways this connection to God out in nature. And one of the things that drives me to do this work is knowing that if we lose the natural world around us, we are losing one of our best connections to the divine. Some of my most profound spiritual encounters have been on the tops of mountains or sitting on quiet beaches. And I think we don't spend enough time sitting in nature and contemplating our relationship with the divine and the harmony of all of creation. And this last faith principle fits in really well with today, which is the feast day of Saint Hildegard, who is a Christian mystic, born in 1898, who died in 1179. And like other Christian mystics, her visions speak to a spirituality grounded in contemplation and the relationship between humans and the natural world, especially as it has to do with how we find harmony with God. Hildegard also writes about the possibility of restoring original harmony between humanity and nature. She says that when humanity adopts an attitude of repentance, that this will lead to the reestablishment of the original harmony of the world created by God. In her third visionary writing, she writes, God has surrounded and strengthened man with everything and has infused him with all around great power, so that the whole creation would assist him in all things. The whole nature should be at man's disposal, that he may work with it, for without it, man may neither live nor exist. And so although she's writing that nature should be at man's disposal, I think this last line reassures us that the relationship between man and creation is characterized by mutual dependence. So I wanted to take a minute to just mention her since it is her feast day today, and because I think Christian mystics actually can teach us a lot about contemplation in nature and restoring that harmony between man and God and all of creation. So now that we have talked a little bit about why we are called to do this work, I want to spend the rest of the time today talking about how we can do this. And one of the best resources that we have in Georgia right now comes from the work of Drawdown Georgia. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that work is and how we can implement some of their practical climate solutions into our programs in faith communities. But first, I want to take a step back and tell you about Project Drawdown, which is a nonprofit that was started in 2014 with the goal of helping the world achieve drawdown. Now, drawdown refers to the point of time in which greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stop increasing and actually start to steadily decline. And so in 2014, a group of scientists and researchers came up with 100 climate solutions to help us as a global community achieve drawdown. These were solutions that you might think of like increasing solar energy, investing more in renewables, but also some social solutions like educating more women and girls. So then a team of researchers here in Georgia decided that they wanted to look at those 100 solutions from Project Drawdown and think about what might be possible here in Georgia. And so this team from Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia, Emory University, Georgia State, and with funding and support from the Ray C. Anderson Foundation, in 2018, this group of researchers came together to look at those 100 climate solutions and think about what might be able to be implemented in Georgia. So they asked questions like, is the solution relevant in Georgia? Is the technology and market ready to scale by 2030? Is there sufficient local experience and available data? Can the solution deliver 1 million metric tons of annual greenhouse gas reduction by 2030? Is it cost competitive with other solutions? And are there significant beyond carbon impacts? And I'll talk a little bit more about what beyond carbon impacts mean. And so they did a lot of research asking these questions, thinking about the solutions, and the result is 20 Drawdown Georgia solutions that they say we can implement these solutions that we could reduce our carbon impact by 1/3 by 2030 here in the state of Georgia. So these are the 20 solutions. You'll note that they are divided into 5 broad categories: electricity, buildings and materials, food and agriculture, land sinks, and transportation. Now you'll note that most of these solutions are focused on the ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. However, the 3 land sink solutions are actually focused on expanding and preserving our natural forests and wetlands, because we know that these green areas in our state serve as land sinks, helping to draw carbon out of the atmosphere. So these 3 solutions are focused on how can we expand those natural spaces in our state. On Drawdown Georgia's website, they have fact sheets for each of the solutions. I'm not going to go through each of them today, but I encourage you to go on their website to look at each of the solutions, to see how they're defining each solution, and to see what they're saying would be what we would need to do with each solution to help us draw down carbon emissions in our state. For example, on each fact sheet, they define what a 1 megaton of carbon reduction looks like, because that's the significant number that they're using. They're saying that each of these solutions must contribute this 1 megaton of carbon reduction if we're going to meet that goal of 1/3 carbon reduction by 2030. And I think it's really helpful how they lay this out, because I'm not a science person. I have no idea what 1 megaton of carbon reduction looks like, but I can conceptualize a little bit what it could look like to divert 2 million tons of organic waste from landfill into composting by 2030. That's a number that makes sense to me. So for each of the solutions on that fact sheet, they include what that would look like. For rooftop solar, it would be 295,000 new 5 kilowatt home solar systems by 2030. So that's a big goal, but we can think about how do we increase our solar capacity in our state to make that happen. Another tool that's on the Drawdown Georgia website that I think is really helpful, and that I think kind of lends well to what Gayla will be talking about next week, is this greenhouse gas emissions tracker. So you can, this is for the picture that I captured here is for the whole state of Georgia, but you can zoom in and look specifically at your county and see where greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. So for each county, they're looking at a couple of sectors. They're looking at transportation, the industrial sector, commercial, residential, agriculture, and forestry. So again, looking at the natural land sinks in each county to see how much carbon we're actually sequestering. And then this gives you a sense too of where are the most emissions coming from. Is it coming from the transportation sector? Is it coming from the residential sector? And so I think that helps to give us a really local look at what's happening here in DeKalb and Fulton counties, and helps us think about, we probably are not producing a lot of emissions from agriculture here in the city. So maybe that's not where our faith community wants to be focusing on. But if the transportation sector is really high, let's look at those transportation solutions and think about how are we increasing public transportation? How are we encouraging carpooling in our faith community and things like that? So I know Gayla next week is going to be talking, when they talk about environmental justice, they'll be talking specifically about some of the things that are local here to Atlanta, to our community here. And so I think I would encourage you all to get on the Drawdown Georgia website and play around with this tracker and look at it a little bit in preparation for next week's conversation. And as I mentioned before, each of the Drawdown Georgia solutions also looks at the beyond carbon impacts. So basically, Drawdown Georgia recognizes that their solutions have impacts beyond their ability to help us reverse climate change. And a lot of those impacts are incredibly positive and lift up our communities, but there might be some less positive impacts as well. And so they have tried to identify what are the impacts beyond just this carbon reduction ability for each solution. So they've looked at how does the solution impact equity, the environment, public health, and the economy. And so just an example of this for the solar solution, we know that solar improves the environment and public health by reducing our reliance on burning fossil fuels. But we know that solar is very expensive and that there's not great accessibility to solar in all communities, particularly in low income communities. And so that raises some equity concerns. And so I really appreciate that for each of the solutions that they have really thought about what are the justice impacts of these solutions as well, and what are the areas that we might need to improve upon for these solutions. And again, that ties in really well with what we do at GIPL, ensuring that all of the solutions that we are recommending to faith communities are not causing harm to our communities, and pairing these solutions too with policy and advocacy initiatives so that we can help to expand access to solar and things like that. So how do we implement these solutions in our faith community? One of the ways that we organize at GIPL is through our green teams. We say that a green team is a group of 3 or more individuals in a faith community who's dedicated to the work of environmental stewardship. So these are the folks in the faith community who are helping to identify the goals and objectives for the faith community. They're the ones who are laying out the plans of this is what we think our faith community can do. They're working one-on-one with us at GIPL, and hopefully then the green team is taking that information back to the congregation, and the congregation is then able to share the information and some of these resources in the broader community. I'm excited that you all do have a green team here at Epiphany, and we've been working with them. I've been working with the green team for the last couple of months and with Nicole. And so I'm excited that the green team is kind of revived and that we're getting started again. And I'm excited to continue working with you all to implement some of these solutions. I want to just share a couple of resources that we have in hopes of maybe inspiring and encouraging some of you to join that green team. So one thing that we have that we can provide to congregations is a congregational survey. This is a chance to kind of get a sense from the broader congregation, what are the things that they are interested in doing. So the survey asks questions like, what environmental topics interest you or concern you? What kinds of activities are you interested in participating in? Is it classes and workshops? Is it nature hikes or river cleanups? Is it advocacy events? And then it asks, would you like to be part of the green team? So if the congregation is interested in sending out the survey, please let me know. We can send it to you, then we'll share the results with you and go over them. But it's, I think, a good first step for green teams to kind of learn from the congregation what they want to work on, because there's always going to be better success if there's buy-in from members of the community. We also have monthly green team roundtables that we offer. They're over Zoom. They are for all of our green teams across the state. They happen once a month, or 1 month it'll be at lunchtime, the next month it'll be in the evenings. It's just 1 hour, and it's a chance for us to connect with our green teams. We usually do 20 or 30 minutes of programming where we'll provide you information on one of our programs, or we'll do a policy briefing, and we'll bring in a guest speaker. And then the next 30 minutes is just a chance for green teams to connect and network with each other. So because you all have a green team here, anybody in the congregation is welcome to come to those roundtables. So it's a chance for you to just learn more about what other green teams are doing, ask questions, get some ideas for how you all might be able to implement some of these solutions here. We also have a green team coaching program. It's a free program. It's 1 year. And we basically, when you sign up for it, we commit to attending your green team meetings once a month or once every other month. It's a way for us to provide some extra support and structure to your congregation. So we also offer a number of practical climate solution programs, and a lot of our programs align with the Drawdown Georgia Solutions. We really see the Drawdown Georgia Solutions as a roadmap for how congregations can engage in this work. So our goal is to eventually have a practical climate solution program for each of those Drawdown Georgia Solutions. But a lot of the work that we're already doing maps onto those solutions. And so a couple of the programs that we have right now have to do with lowering our carbon footprint in our faith communities. So we have a solar program. We offer free basic solar assessments to congregations, so you all can assess whether or not solar is even a viable option here. And then we work with a number of vetted solar installers who will provide proposals. We kind of work as the liaison, so we'll talk to you about what your financing options are, help set up those meetings with the solar installers. We can talk to committees or members of the faith community who are making those decisions and provide more information, but we're really just here to connect you with the right people and provide you with the information that you need to assess whether or not that's a possibility for your faith community. We also have a PowerWise program, so you all have actually received a PowerWise energy audit from us in the past. Those audits make recommendations for energy efficiency retrofit, so things like LED lights, Wi-Fi thermostats, attic insulation. Thinking about the ways that you can make some improvements to your facilities that will help to save you on energy bills and will also help to lower the amount of energy that you're using in your congregation. And then a new program that we just launched is our electric vehicle charging station program. And so this aligns with some of those transportation solutions that I talked about. So basically, we want to help congregations think about how they might use their parking lots to put in charging stations that would help to expand the accessibility of electric vehicles in the community. It could be a place where community members could come, charge their vehicles, kind of a service to the community. You can also get charging stations that you can charge customers, so it doesn't necessarily have to be that can be one way to help offset the cost of putting in the charging stations. But we work with installers who can help you all think about that. There's also a program through Georgia Power called the Make Ready program, where Georgia Power will actually pay for the infrastructure, so like all of the wiring and things. That's the most expensive part of putting in charging stations, and then the only cost to the congregation is the charging stations themselves. So it's a new program that we've just launched. We're working with a couple of faith communities now to put in charging stations. We also have a number of programs to help you all think about how you as a faith community and how you as individuals can reduce your carbon footprint through some of your daily practices, through increasing recycling and composting, reducing food waste, switching to a plant-forward diet. This is actually a Drawdown Georgia solution, and it doesn't mean that you have to stop eating meat. They're just recommending that maybe you eat plant-based a couple of times a week, or that you switch from red meat and pork, which are higher in carbon emissions, to lower emission meats like poultry and fish. And so I love that it's things like that that are part of these solutions, because it's things that we might already be doing, or things that feel to me very accessible. I don't have a house right now. I can't put up solar panels on my house, but I could eat less meat, and that's one way that I can take part in these Drawdown Georgia solutions. And I think the power of Drawdown Georgia is that faith community people, it's not just for faith communities, it's for organizations all across the state. So when you think about how all across the state people are implementing some of these solutions, you think about how every little bit does help, because I think a lot of times we think, what can I do as an individual? How do my individual actions make an impact? But if you think about how, each of us starts composting, then we're working towards that goal of diverting 2 million tons of composting away from the landfill. And so I think that helps me feel hopeful that my individual actions are contributing to a greater good that researchers and scientists are saying will make an impact. We have a new zero waste program at GIPL, so we are offering zero waste audits to congregations. So we'll come and do a walkthrough of your facility, dig through your dumpster and go through your trash, and see what you're throwing away, and think about how you might be able to divert some of that into recycling or composting streams. So if you're interested in that program, let us know. Through that program, we also offer sustainability policies, and so we'll help your congregation write a policy or some guidelines that can help guide things like, what do we do at events? What do we do at meals? I see that you all are using real dishes this morning. That's great. Like, that's one of the things that we would write into the policy, so that anybody who's coming to use your space knows that those are the expectations, that you're not going to have disposable products, that you're going to maybe ban styrofoam and other hard to recycle materials. So that policy is one thing that we can help you create. We have a template for it, and we'll help you customize it for your congregation. We also offer classes in film screening. So if you're interested in doing some more education on some of these topics, we work with professors from Columbia Theological Seminary and Candler School of Theology who will teach on the intersection between our faith and the climate. We have partnerships with other organizations and leaders, experts in some of these topics who can talk more about energy efficiency, can talk about solar and water use and sustainable land use. So if you're interested in some more educational classes, please let us know. And then we do have some seed grant money as well. So if you offer either the Active Hope class or the Creation Fair 101 class to your congregation, you can apply for up to $500 in seed grant money to implement any eco project of your choice. So if there's something that really stands out to everybody today and you're like, we just need a little bit of funding to help do this, we can offer $500 in seed grant funds. But there are a number of other ways that you can implement these climate solutions in the congregation. So it's things like, one of the things that the Zero Waste program will look at is making sure office paper, toilet paper, paper towels are made from recycled materials, reducing printing and mailings and newsletters, planning meatless meals for congregational events and suppers, thinking about carpool opportunities. If you're doing an off-campus activity, are you meeting here first, or is there a way that you can be carpooling with one another? Planting tree plantings. We work with Trees Atlanta to do tree plantings in the community. So that's one way to think about these landfill solutions, increasing and improving our forests. Using the space around the church itself to do community garden work, to plant for the community. And then there's a lot of these things that you can do at home as well. The Drawdown on Georgia solutions are not just for congregations and communities, but for individuals and families as well. Thinking about where you're buying your clothing and furniture, making sure that you're bringing grocery bags and produce bags to the grocery store, bringing Tupperware when you go out to eat so that you're not getting to-go containers. You can do a home energy assessment to think about energy efficiency retrofits in your home. Even simple things like turning off and unplugging appliances when they're not in use. All of these things, map onto these Drawdown Georgia solutions. So I just wanted to share some of these ideas for you today, and then want to have a conversation about how do these solutions align with the gifts and skills of our community, and how, what's resonating with you all, and how do you see this congregation kind of implementing some of these solutions? Maybe things that you're already doing, or things that stood out to you that you think it would be great if the church could do more of.
All right, I got the microphone, so I'm happy to pass it around and you feel led.
Yeah, feel free to also use the time to ask questions.
Sorry, I'm Brenda Floyd, and just wondering, talking about solar panels. Georgia is full of trees, and we have discussed putting solar panels on this building, but we're told we have too many trees. So, how do solar panels really work in Atlanta where there's so many trees?
Yeah,
I'm just curious about that.
no, that's a good question. So sometimes solar installers will recommend that you cut trees down to put solar panels on. And so then it kind of becomes a question of what is the priority. So, if you want to, we just talked about how important it is to preserve our land sinks and our forests. And so cutting down trees feels like a bad solution. One of the things that sometimes we'll recommend if you do have to cut down trees to put on solar panels, are there other places that you can replant some trees? So you're cutting a tree down, replanting a tree. I think that, that's a conversation I've had to have with some faith communities about, is that the best thing to do, to cut down all of our trees? And sometimes we say, maybe it's not, maybe solar is not going to be a viable solution for you. And sometimes that does just have to be the answer. Our solar installers do a lot of mapping to see, where the trees are, the positioning of the roof, depending on, where the solar panels are gonna go, what section of the roof, is there too much shading there? Maybe you just have to cut down this section of trees. You're probably not gonna put panels on the full roof. And so some shading on the roof is fine, but if you can clear out the shading from the section that the solar panels are gonna go on, maybe that's a fair recommendation. But yeah, trees are definitely one of the things that we look at when we do these viability studies to see, is there going to be too much shading, or, we'll say, we need you to cut down this section of trees, something like that. And then we can help you think about replanting the trees on site or elsewhere in the community to help offset that.
Marion Curry, we're relatively new here. And so I don't know what we're already doing. So I'd like to hear what we're doing.
Would someone that like to share about that?
Well, I'm not actually on the virtual right now, but with the grant from Gil that we did. John Guzman, on the Building and Grounds Committee, and a couple of years ago, we got a grant from Gil to retrofit all the fixtures and LEDs, and we have pretty much done that. I think we're at maybe 900%.
Hi, this is Kate. One thing I know that we've done is we have partnered with Trees Atlanta before to plant some trees on our property. 80, not some, 80.
That's a lot of trees.
Our field has sort of just restarted in the last couple of months. We've had a lot of talk about composting, what it would like to compost activity. There's been a lot of talk about what we can do with our meadow next door. We've had a lot of talk about doing a more thorough assessment of each of our program areas and the way that we use this space in order to get a little bit more clear about what our priorities can, maybe, and should be out of those results. One thing that I will say is that city folks have a lot of good ideas. And one of the things that we continue to run up against is the organizing power to get from that good idea to actual implementation. And so that takes commitment, and that takes some amount of investment from the volunteers. And so I think we're still kind of working towards that, and we'll invite folks who are here in this room and also those who review this recording later to think about what it might mean to kind of to lend yourself really to some of these solutions in a more committed way over the coming weeks.
Hi, I'm Paul. Of all of these different potential projects, is there one that has just a disproportionately important like wood solar in terms of injecting carbon into the atmosphere?
Yeah, I think each of these solutions, what the researchers are saying is that each of these solutions has the ability to contribute to this 1 megaton of carbon reduction. So purely from like that scale, each of these solutions technically has the same ability to contribute to lower carbon emissions. But I think diverting 2 million tons of compost feels like a lot of compost to divert. Maybe it feels like if we can get, solar capacity up, it's probably going to take us less time to get to the solar capacity that we need to reach that 1 megaton of reduction. And so I think, I get this question a lot of like, this is a whole lot of information, what should we do? And it feels like a cop-out, but what I usually tell people is that you need to do what you're interested in and what you're passionate about, because I can't sit here as an outsider and say that you need to start composting here. I don't know if that's a viable solution for this community. But I think if there's significant interest and folks who are dedicated to trying to figure out how to make solar work here, then like if that's where the interest is, then focus on that, because like that's what's going to actually be able to be implemented. As Nicole was just saying too, with like the organizing power, I always tell people who are thinking about organizing, like, do what you're interested in, do what you think is actually achievable. So for your faith community, sometimes it's just a matter of having some of these internal conversations about what is it that we think we can actually achieve here, because that's going to be the best solution. It's not going to be the best solution to start composting if nobody's actually going to like follow through with it and do it. I think like solar is a great solution, particularly for faith communities who have a lot of roof space. You can put pretty significant solar systems. Faith communities use a lot of energy just in their everyday practices. So being able to convert some of that to renewable energy, that's never going to be a bad solution for faith communities to take. And especially because you've done a lot of these retrofitting projects already, you're already done kind of the internal things inside the building to help to lower those energy costs and that energy consumption. And so solar will pair very well with that.
I'm Carol, and I'm even newer than you guys. I'm brand new. But, and thank you, Hannah. She just did this fabulous job of laying out a landscape that you can kind of wander in. And I would say the first thing to do is fall in love. And fall in love with this planet, which is literally God's voice. And pray about what is calling your heart. What part of God's voice do you hear the loudest right now? And it will be different for different people. And that's what's so wonderful about Drawdown Georgia, is that the array of choices. But what I've found when I'm in love is there's enough time, there are enough people, I'm not frightened. And so the path opens out of love and into love and prayer. And the awe thing, we tried to put awe at the top, you know, the first principle. And people kind of said, you're whacked. That's a little weird for us. So we dropped awe down, but 2 or 3 times a day, as Mary Oliver says, if you can just be killed with the light, just about killed with the light, then I think your heart and your gut and your brain will come together. And Hannah will be a fabulous resource. And having Nicole here is an enormous gift. And the sermon was like out of the ballpark. And so this feels like an exquisitely wonderful place to be, to begin this work in love. So I thank you very much. I have lots of questions, but I'll save those.
That was beautifully said. Thank you.
I was thinking, is there anyone around who can make a meme of that?
Yes, my dad was also, I'm the one to talk about. He said, and you probably won't know this, that the only prayer we ever say is thank you. So sometimes I think we get overcome by prayers as job jobs. No, I have this, you know, one that another. But if the only prayer we say is thank you, that will suffice. And don't you think?
I think so. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, we are very like solution driven, and as a society, as an organization, I'll admit we're very solution driven, but you know, one of the best things that faith communities can do is get out in nature together. And I'm going to use this as a shameless plug for next week's river cleanup that I've been organizing with Nicole and some other community members. But really, this is it's in celebration of World River Day, which is next Sunday. And so people all over the world are going to be cleaning up our rivers. And so it's a chance for us as a faith community to spend some time outside in nature together, to probably pick up some trash out of the river or along the trails, however we are feeling called to do that. But I think it's a great first step for this faith community to spend some time in nature together, to say thank you for this world around us, and to think about, use that time to, think about what is being placed on our hearts. Because I don't think that it has to be that, tomorrow we need to have 5 solutions in mind that we're going to act on. I think going to this river cleanup is a great first step of this community, taking some action in nature together, but also just spending time in contemplation. We'll be at Mason Mill Park, beautiful area, from 3 to 5 p.m. And then youth are invited to join other interfaith youth from across Atlanta at Clyde Shepherd at the same time. The Mason Mill cleanup is open to anyone, so if your youth would rather be with you at Mason Mill, that's totally fine. But the Clyde Shepherd one is specifically just for youth 12 to 25. It's a chance for you to spend some time together with some folks from Interfaith Atlanta, GIPL, some other organizations. So definitely encourage you all to come out to that cleanup and use that as a time to kind of do what we've been talking about today.
Invite your friends and neighbors too. It's really great opportunity.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up for me too, as we talk about solutions and actions, is also just witness. And I think, Carol, your comments about falling in love with creation and of God and the interconnectedness of our being and livelihoods is also really about that. Howard Thurman says that religion is better caught than it is taught. And so sometimes I think that doing just that is sometimes the most influential difference we can make in our communities too, is falling in love ourselves with creation and becoming, allowing that passion to rise up in us.
It really isn't. It's for people of great faith. Because passengers seat belts.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, like what I said before, that about how Drawdown Georgia just reminds me that there's so much that we can do as individuals that make this greater community impact is really where I find the hope in this work. And thinking about the little things that I can do just by myself. And I think that's a lot of times where it has to start with me as an individual, doing an examine of my own life and practices and trying and challenging myself to find 1 or 2 things that I want to start doing, and then sharing those with my friends and neighbors and family and encouraging them to do the same. And that's kind of how the ball gets rolling in this. And so that's one thing that I will encourage you all to do as well, is just spend some time thinking about this, not even thinking about it on a community level, but thinking about it personally, like as an individual. Where are you feeling, Paul?
Any last comments or questions for Hannah?
Thank you so much for inviting me to come today, and hope that you all will come back next week to hear from Gayla and talk about some advocacy and some political actions that you all can take, and thinking about some of the issues that are impacting our local community here.
Thank you, Hannah, so much. Let me carry you on out of this space. The Lord be with you. God, we give you so much thanks for who you are to us in the world around us. The trees that give us shade, shelter, for the fields that embrace us on a summer's day, for all the plants and animals that give us food. By your Holy Spirit, invite us evermore into the awe of who you are among us, and inspire us to love and to live in step with that wonder. Amen.